All right, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So first, I just want to gauge the room. Do I have any vets, anyone current military, prior military? All right. Anyone in finance or program? Anyone working? Okay. So today, I'm going to talk about how the work that I do empowers the warfighter. It also empowers various business units. But what I want to really talk about is how it empowers the warfighter specifically, because as a part of my role, my name is Teneika. I work for the financial management domain of the Navy, and in that work, it's a lot of different conversations with different working groups. So in those working groups, what we do sometimes is go on operational tours, which is super fun. I get to go out, see the boats. I get to see the submarines, tour the ships, tour the planes. And as a part of that, what ends up happening is I talk to the people on the ground, the sailors, the civilians, the contractors. But specifically, when we think about the warfighters, and I ask them, what could we do for you? What could AI do for you? It's always, can you make my check right? So when I hear that, I'm thinking, well, what's wrong with your check? And there's so many different things that I've heard over the years. So there's making sure people are paid on time. There's making sure when people PCS, meaning moving duty stations, they change duty stations, making sure their pay reflects that accurately. Or this ship is old. We just need new parts. We need new equipment. Making sure my family has better housing. There's so many different areas of empowerment that could happen. And so a lot of that always comes to the finance person. So anytime they hear that FMC is coming in, they bring all of their questions to the tour, and we love the tours, but we always know that there's going to be this moment of, I get to ask the people who write my checks, and we're like, we don't write it, we just help facilitate the money. So with that said, I want to ask you all, just to get into the mindset of kind of what we do every day, if you were given, let's say $1 billion, and you were asked to spend that $1 billion, what would you spend it on? Anybody? Just tell me one or two things that you would spend the $1 billion on. Legos. Legos. So could you spend $1 billion on Legos in 24 hours? No? So when we think about this, if I ask you, you only have 24 hours and you have to spend $1 billion, would you all know what to spend it on? I see a lot of head nods. What would you spend it on?
Oh, I work for the government.
So you would definitely know. Immediately disperse it out, send it to all the different programs. But most people wouldn't, right? So a lot of people, when I've asked this question before, they hop into like ChatGPT. And ChatGPT is going to give you all of these different answers and remarks. But if you were given restrictions around the money, so I'm telling you, you cannot spend it on any necessities, no household supplies, no toilet tissue, no paper towels. You also can't spend it on debt. You can't pay your house payment. You can't pay your mortgage. You can't pay down credit card debt. You can't also invest it on Wall Street. That took out so many people, so many different individuals' ideas for where they would spend it. You're given these other restrictions on your data. You can't donate it to a charity. You can't buy gold. You can't buy anything of personal luxury. That yacht that you were thinking of buying, nope, can't get it. But you can only also spend it in the U.S. So this is just a question that I ask because it helps people get into the mindset of, one, how do you think about spending money and where do you think about spending it? But two, can you make strategic decisions in a short amount of time? Most individuals can't. So when we think about some of the answers I've received from this and some of the answers that could have been received, of course, people could have said, large-scale infrastructure, railroads. That's something that we struggle with. I live in Atlanta. The railroad system is horrible. No one wants to take MARTA. The people that do take MARTA, they complain. How can we put more money into infrastructure? You can R&D. AI is booming right now. Everything, this conference is all about AI. So how can you spend it on AI, make an investment now into AI or cutting edge research? There's other areas such as education. You can establish different endowments or funds. You can do additional areas of technology. Investing it in your community, whether it's community centers, affordable housing projects, or creating campaigns for public health or doing any other investments. Overall, the goal of this exercise was to get people into the mindset of we have to make decisions. Sometimes the money is shown, and we see that this money is available, but organizations can't make decisions on what to spend it on when we tell them, hey, we saved you $1 billion. What are you going to do with it? And then everyone's confused. They don't know where to put it. They don't know where it goes. So these are some of the things that help get our stakeholders into just different benefits and thinking about AI from the lens of, if we could give you this money back, what would you do with it? So I'm just going to go over some of the impacts of what we've done and talk about how it's helped us in FMNC and the Navy as well. So the first thing, working with the organization, we work in an environment at Vana. We use Databricks within our Vana environment. Doing that, we've been able to bring in 190 data sources. Those data sources range from people data, organizational data, program data, operational data, financial data. All of that means when we think about building out analytics and machine learning, we had to figure out how to get our pipelines to run in a way that made data available quickly. We got our pipelines, our data pipelines to provide data at a near real-time rate of 5 minutes, which was not possible. It was at a 24-hour rate or a week. So we were only batch processing data from our financial systems at that point in time, never at the 5-minute mark. So now that we had it at the 5-minute mark, we had the data available, but we were not giving the model results to our customers at that same rate. So we worked to understand how we could change our environment, configuration, and we reduced our runtimes, which also helped us decrease our jobs. So bringing in what we used to do and taking into account, okay, now that we're in this environment, we understand our cluster's behavior, we understand the performance. Everyone is seeing all these fancy new features that are available in Databricks now, but I want you all to think about, I can't remember which Databricks we're on. 5 years old. So we're on a 5-year-old Databricks platform. And so we are creating this impact on a platform that's 5 years old, but we're taking and creating innovative solutions to make this happen. So a lot of the things that you're doing today, we're kind of makeshifting these happen through dashboards that we create and jobs that we run to showcase data. So we've run jobs that show we are spending too much on jobs. We run a job to show that we're spending too much on jobs, and then we use a job to also decrease the amount of spend. And basically, we run a machine learning model to say, you need to change your configuration to this based on your previous runs. This is also fed into the impact of our model. So based on one of the use cases that I'll show you today, we've been able to give the Navy back $2.2 billion. So what that means is now you have $2.2 billion. What are you going to do with it? Do you return it to Treasury and say, hey, we didn't use it, but here you go? That's not what you want to do, because then they're going to say, you didn't use that $2 billion last year, so we're going to take $2 billion off of what you're going to get this year. So we want to use that money. So then we think about throughout the year, how do we disperse? So we've been able to use machine learning models to help us disperse money as well. So $650 million was dispersed throughout the year. We've been able to review $211 billion in unliquidated obligations, meaning we had an obligation to pay someone, but it was not adjusted or paid yet. How do we do that? And so these adjustments have allowed us to do a lot of things. We look at the transactions that are placed when we think about, do I pay my Amazon bill to AWS? I don't want to be paying my AWS bill to Amazon. So being able to match those transactions up and make sure we're paying the right people. And we've been able to create an environment where our analysts have to do less, they can do now less work, but have a higher impact. So when we see 80% less samples that we've been delivering, we have a risk-based model, and I'll talk about this in a second, that essentially the users our financial analysts go out and they say, hey, did this document get paid out? Was this program delivered? Is there still money on the books left? Can we take these funds or de-obligate these funds from that program and put it to another program? And what we end up doing is there was 125,000 samples that they were doing each year in prior years. Now with a risk-based sampling approach, they don't review 125,000, they're reviewing about 24,000 and having a higher impact at 2.2 billion. In prior years, it was around the 306 million. So you see 2.2 billion, and it's very easy to show ROI. It's 2.2 billion, but we tell our customers, hey, this job for your organization is only $2,700 a year. If you want the job that really runs and it'll save you during the active year where you're able to move funds and adjust throughout the year, it's $400. So for $3,200, you get these nice products that will return almost $3 billion to your organization. Sorry, not $3 billion to the entire organization, but a portion of this. So this has been very crucial to people want to figure out, well, how can I use AI? Everyone says AI is going to take my job, and I say, well, AI is going to help you do less work on this, and then you can be able to do more strategic work. So you don't have to do the number crunching. You don't have to review as many documents. When we send out our samples for people to review, they have to go through 10 to 30 pages of documents. If we're telling them, hey, you don't have to do that for 30 samples, but you are given 3 or 4 that we believe are really at high risk, now that you've taken away the time that they were spending on things that actually we don't believe that this is a risk, so don't review it. And then the cost savings from a labor perspective has been about $9 million to the Navy. So these are just some numbers that you can look at and say, wow, this is amazing. But all these numbers mean is we're starting to use AI and machine learning. We're doing it in a place now where when we get to the new environment in September, it's going to explode. It's going to be so much better for our organization, but these numbers are going to look and ideally help the Navy get to audit. So how do we do it? So when we think about the environment, again, we work in the Advana enclave of environments and communities. So we are finance, so we have to make sure all of our models are auditable. So we work in GitLab to ensure that all of our work is tracked and stored. Every adjustment that we make to our model has to be auditable. So including explainable AI, we can't just use that. We use SHAP, of course, to help explain why our models are giving the results that we're doing. But we've tried different systems and tools. We end up coming back to, let's just go back to MLflow and then use a SHAP model, because when we use these other systems or tools, throughout our pipeline, we always found that there was high latency somewhere. So we incorporated a tool during the build and run of the pipeline. That tool took 18 hours, and we wanted to get the results back 2 to 3 times a day in batch inferencing. So 18-hour job was not working for us. So we ended up rebuilding that entire pipeline in MLflow, and it was 3 hours. Once we validate, we typically go through this cycle of deploy and test, and then we move it over to monitoring. The biggest issue is you deploy a model, and what happens? You need testers. You need people to validate it. So our user group is very interesting. They don't want to use anything. Again, they're auditors, they're financial analysts. They don't use it unless they know it works. But we can't get them to test it and understand that it works if we don't get them to use it. So what happens is we have to go through this cycle of development where we're showcasing to them What are we doing? What are we building? How are we transforming the features? We're using TensorFlow, XGBoost. We use PyTorch. And there's a lot of different packages in this process, but we're going through this process of explaining to them how we do it through office hours. Every other week, we meet and we explain to them what's being done. And we had one user group come in, they tested it, they saw that that user group had $89 million that they were able to give back to their organization. When they saw $89 million, we got another user group in. And so that we just kept getting more and more after that. And so once we were able to do that, we've just been in this cycle of evaluation and retraining to make sure that we get a better model. We don't have a feature store, so we've created a feature store using some of our S3 tables and in a space that way. That's allowed us to create, once we register our models, that's allowed us to create a space for our users to go into a model, not only the model registry, but a list of tables and reuse those tables to implement into their organization's programmatic planning, budgeting, and controls. And then we also have an endpoint. So outside of Click, we have users who are a little bit more advanced. We take cycles of what we build, we showcase them, and we also make our notebooks and packages available to everyone. So in doing this, when we talk about what was built, this is what was done. So most of you all know if you sell to the government, there's a period of time where you really want to sell now. So there's a period of time where you want to sell. Most people try to come into that green phase, but most organizations also don't realize that blue phase is also where money is getting repurposed and shuffled around. And so that's not happening often enough. So what happened was operations and maintenance is the first use case that we did. This use case essentially said, we have money. Where you see C's, which mean current, this means we have dedicated money to a program, a contract, or vendor. And this money is for us to initiate, sign those contracts, start paying people. For all of our regular operational funds, this is where things happen. So a 1-year appropriation, we have money that's coming out. We want to get that money paid out and sent. If that appropriation or that money is not spent by year 2, then it starts to expire. So once those initial years pass, if that money isn't spent, it starts to vanish. And then what happens is, in that expired phase, the goal would be to catch those funds before the first quarter of the expiration phase, which means you want to catch it typically by that June, July timeframe so that you can start to repurpose it before the end of the year. And you never want to be in the X. So you never want to be in the X. So when we hear vendors, they reach out and come to us, this is the time frame that vendors who know finance know, hey, let me also see what money is on the books or hasn't been appropriated or moved. That money, when we think about building a data science model, the goal was to drive back the buying power. How much money can you get? So now let's start to send our people to conferences. Let's start to acquire. Do we have any new tools that we need? That money coming back, organizations don't know what to do with. Now we have a better problem. They don't know what to do with the money now that they have the money back. So making sure that that money is there required us to build a model that built a probability score of the likelihood of that money expiring. And so what you see in the blue on the far right is you have the first 5 months of that appropriation. In the blue, there's a mid-year cycle where our analysts go in and say, do we think what's going to happen with this money? People say the government runs slow, things don't happen, but there's a point in time where maybe there's no movement on the funds. There's nothing happening. And so what ends up happening is we see a lot of movement happen at that 9-month mark where the money is there, nothing's moved. So what we want to do is start to prevent that from happening. So the goal is we send back $2 billion every year to Treasury. We don't want to do that anymore. let's create a model to give the buying power back into the customer in the year of execution, which means the year that the money is supposed to be spent. And then let's also create a risk-based sampling model, which just means, can we pull out a bunch of contracts and documents and say, hey, this is currently running. This is money that the Navy has obligated or said that they were going to pay out. Let's see if this money is being spent. I worked with my organization and we challenged 20 different budget offices to just take back 5% of what their budget was. So to date, in the first quarter adjustments, we identified $306 million. And again, the hardest part is getting people to use it. So how did we do that? This is the process. Our larger budget office comes in and they say, hey, to all of our BSOs, or all of our 20 BSOs, you have a bunch of money outstanding. You need to figure out if it's spent. Well, what was happening is they give them a set of criteria, and in that criteria, they tell them, we want you to go out and review all of these documents. Everything in blue represents about 1,000 documents. So we're telling people to review 125,000 documents, and they have to do it before the end of the quarter. It costs anywhere from $20 to $31 an hour to review these documents. So when we think about having individuals review these documents, they have to go through a lengthy evaluation phase. And what's happening is, if you were given, this is your job, you're given these documents, and all you're reading is contracts and paperwork. So the deobligation model we built was a model that said, hey, if I'd said, actually, don't even look at a third of that. Only look at the ones that are classified as high priority. So the goal was to build a deobligation model that understood what is the likelihood of a contract deobligating or funds to deobligate. And so what we were able to do is build a classification that showcased this is a high likelihood based on historical contracts that showcase these similar contracts all expired after this because either they weren't executed, no one performed it. We look at, did you update the contract? So when you all are going out and doing work with individuals, making sure that they're updating notes in the system that showcase, hey, this contract has moved. Has it moved phases? According to your statement of work, have you delivered upon that? What was paid? Looking at the line items. So being able to quickly review that, what we ended up doing was working with Databricks to build out a pipeline. And so again, I mentioned we tried other tools. I'm not going to mention those tools, but we tried other tools, and we settled on MLflow and a native model because that ended up being what worked. So we built out a pipeline that ingested data from 3 different major financial systems. From these financial systems, we had 4 notebooks that just went through a process or a series of notebooks. There's a 5th one that kicks off all the notebooks, but these notebooks go through this process of feature engineering, then training the data, using MLflow to do that, creating a deployment, and then using MLflow to also help score these contracts. And there's a lot of tables here, but essentially we ended up having all these tables, and we show this data in a click dashboard. All of this data, this whole process took us the first iteration about 6 months to really understand the customers. The biggest part is understanding the customers. People will come to me and they say, I want a machine learning model. And I say, well, what is a machine learning model? Or they say, I want AI. And I say, well, what is AI? The AI will make sure that I get my data. And I'm like, well, what is the data? And there's this process of some people think AI, well, if you put data in a system, it'll just automatically correct it. And I have to advise, well, how do corrections happen? Someone has to say that it was incorrect. And so a lot of this is education on what AI is. And so even the first part of the pre-processing and feature engineering, that process took the longest because our customers didn't really understand entirely what AI was, but we needed to understand their business process so that we can build out the logic that was needed to get to the end result, the target results. So what that ended up meaning was when we built out the model for the first iteration of the model, which used FY22 data, we forecasted what those proactive DOBs were. We understood what they were. We significantly improved over time, but we had to figure out how to continuously engage our customers. The first iteration, the model worked, but there's customers who don't trust the model. So in order to build trust, we had to do demo after demo after demo. We met with customers every other week. We met with customers between those weeks. We met with customers to understand their environment, and they would give us their particular, well, this doesn't work for us because our organization doesn't de-obligate during this period, or they have organizations that say, we only do it every other month. So there was no consistency. What we ended up doing was just creating a general model and then helping individuals understand this model, you can use it and it will help you bring back. So we had one organization, again, as I mentioned, they use it, they sat with us throughout the entire process. They saw almost $90 million come back. They sat on calls and they helped us showcase, like, we've been able to take back 90 million, so we've been able to give back bonuses. We've been able to add this program that we thought was going to run out of funds. We've been able to repurpose those funds. When they showcased and talked about what they were able to do, then we started to get more customers in. So we realized that customer buy-in was really, really, really important. We were in a stage of, well, let's just build. But we had 18 other customers that we needed to get buy-in from, so we had to continuously use that. So what ended up happening is we had to explain the process of precision recall and how it worked. There were customers that would say, well, it doesn't predict accurately, or I still have to do the same thing that I'm doing now. And so we had to really explain to them, this is the graphic that I would use. So there's a model, and I'm gonna go back to the previous slide. There's models that you will see in that previous slide where the precision was higher, the recall was lower. We had to really explain that, yes, ideally, we want the most precise. We want you to get only documents that have high likelihood of deobligating. But we want to be able to understand precision. When you think about what that is if you go to the doctor and the doctor says, or you might have XYZ disease and this will be life-threatening. You don't want a false positive result. You want an actual result. You want to know, do I have this or not? And so that's essentially what when we think about precision, we want to make sure that the result is the actual result. When we think about recall, we want to be able to find, all of the relevant results. So all of the markers that indicate that this may be a high likelihood of me having this. So when we think about fraudulent transactions, when you go to the bank, if you swipe your card, this is you don't want to have your card declined. It's embarrassing. You're at the restaurant, you're at dinner, and everyone's looking at you like you're broke. No, we don't want that to happen. So what ends up happening is if you have a balance of precision and recall, which is within the F1 score, then you're able to understand, okay, if I can adjust mine, I'm gonna go back to this slide. If I can adjust, you'll see there's different iterations of experimentation where our precision went up, recall declined, our F1 score went up, F1 score declined, because we experimented a lot. The goal was to get to a model that our customers were comfortable with, and we had to keep doing those experiments. And in doing so, what ended up happening was we allowed, we had 92,000 adjustments that were caught. So $306 million that were adjusted during the year. If you were to give back $306 million, what would you tell the Navy to do with it? I'm interested to see what everyone thinks we should do with the money that gets respent. Another jet. Those jets are expensive. On the plane, they would tell you the equipment for the jets. The equipment for the jets might be $306 million in itself. But yes, so all of this work is to get to that little red column in the app. So we did all that work, and all that column says is 90%, 60%, 80%, it gives a percentage. And most people don't understand that that's sometimes what machine learning is this was 6 or 7 months worth of work. And yes, it is a column that gives you a predictive score, but the predictive score also is what kicks off other work. So that is one of our models. The biggest impact model was the model that says, hey, out of the high risk items, I only want to review a sample population of those. And this is the one that helped us return 2.2 billion. So we took everything that was high risk, and then we zoned in on them, and we said, which ones out of this high risk population do we know for a fact probably have the highest likelihood of expiring or canceling? So we used AI and machine learning to help determine a set of risk criteria. And what that meant was we had to create a risk profile based on historical data. So we created this risk profile, and we had to do it for 20 different BSOs. What that meant was, remember I said, this doesn't work for my organization, or this doesn't work for my organization. We couldn't have anything that was as general. So we ended up creating something that took into account various organizations. We assigned it a weighted factor score, which essentially meant we used weighted factors to assess and determine the highest risk of what was open. And then we created like a total weighted document score. That score was then used to help filter out things like, has it been over 90 days? Did we pay? What was the last transaction date on that document? And so we used a Sloven's formula to help understand if it was statistically significant. We're also working with doing stratified sampling instead to see if we can improve what we've already done. And then we applied key support. We applied all of this to create a flag. Again, that column, that will be just one column that would give them a flag that says, you should review this. And so we sent that off, and all this does is it goes to a tool, a OSD tool, that gives every budget submitting office a list of flag documents that they should review. We reused our current pipeline and structure. And so what that meant was we started working with the analytics team, and we're working with this team to make sure that we are pushing towards code reuse, but also making sure that this is an auditable process. This process is the one that our auditors, every week, they want to understand how we did, what we did, and how exactly we're getting all this money back. They want to make sure the money is legit. They want to make sure that this is something that they had never seen before. So we're in conversations, and we've been in conversations with them since we've launched this, because they don't necessarily, they understand it, but they're still wanting to know that, is this process something that could be auditable? And is this process, from the lens of audit, something where we can trace back the money? And actually now they're wanting to see, why is this happening in the first place? So we're using the same, again, we're taking these pipelines that we've already built in Databricks, and we're reusing them. We're adding in we have a couple additional XGBoost models that we've added. And this pipeline has been able to identify, and you can see here when we think about what's been done. Again, we're iterating over, we're experimenting. We've been able to return that $2 billion, but also have throughout the year, so 3 months, 6 months, 9-month mark, they're out of that $650 million, you're getting money, organizations are getting more money back. So with that money that's coming back, now they're wanting to know, how can we get more? You give them $10, you give them $100, you give them $100 million, and they want more. So what's been happening is more of our organizations are looking at how they can get more money back, because when they see from the first model, this is money that we've been able to repurpose to training. We can get people trained up. We can get people trained in AI. We can make sure that our sailors and our warfighters, when we think about Injuries. I went on a tour. There's AI being used in how quickly we can get people back to their ships, how quickly they recover. What do we need to reconsider as they recover so they don't re-injure themselves? That money could be used towards that. There's a lot of infrastructure and facilities that need just re-improvement and rework. The infrastructure cost for that exceeds billions of dollars. I mean, and even just supply chains, boats, ships, maintenance, all of that is needed, and this is money that could just be repurposed towards that. So when we think about what we've been able to do, a lot of that has been leveraging AI, but we also have to tell people that AI isn't just something that happens. You have to come into the conversation with us. You have to join the meetings. You have to, when you join the meetings, you can't just be quiet. You have to speak up. The organizations that speak up have the models that work for them. So when some organizations are like, oh, I'm returning 90 million, and the other organization's like, well, I got 13. It's because you didn't speak up in the conversation, so we aren't able to train the models on how you think. And so when we can think about, well, where does your process when you go to deobligate a document, what are you thinking about? Are you looking at the days since it was last active? Are you looking at what the contract date, what was delivered, what's in the statement of work versus what your performance scores are? You know, when we have organizations that give us that insight, we're able to train the models that then showcase that. So I always tell people the AI isn't going to take over. You're still going to be there, but you need to be there because we can't just leverage AI to, one, we have to make sure it's auditable, but we can't just leverage AI to completely do it autonomously, even though we love that. But when you think about making decisions, AI can't just make the decision for you. If we are on the ground and we're in a situation, the warfighters who are on the ground in situations, they can't use AI right then and there to make that decision because they're in stressful situations that require human thought and connectivity to what's happening on the ground. So when we think about productivity, AI can help automate data collection, AI can help automate analysis, but who strategically thinks about that? So we're still working with making sure that this happens. That you ensure your customers know you have skills that need to be brought. There's defined processes that need to be placed, and that you are critical within this process. So we have a lot of wins. This is our slide. This is the annual report if you actually want to look at what we've been able to do, what we've done. This is our by the numbers, what we've accomplished. So when we think about where we're looking to go, autonomous auditing is the new wave, and audit is our big area and our big focus. So while we want things to be autonomous, we want to make sure that we can do things in a way that are auditable. So having an area of making sure our transactions, how do we match those? Making sure we have a system in place that would look at documentation and evaluate that documentation, look at contracts, understand where that contract is. Using document understanding, making sure that, understanding that your users have to know where document understanding could be useful, but also where it could be faulty. So there's a lot of evangelism and education that goes behind this work, but making sure that they understand if you do help us, there's hours saved, there's time saved, there's labor saved, and there's money that could go back to your paychecks as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And they told me to add this slide at the end where you complete a survey. So thank you.